Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
Solitaire Frisbee from the Children's Room.
We're having another Conversations about Mythology.
All right.
Yeah, we're still on Native American mythology, and we're still in the Southwest.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit today about the Navajo people.
Is that a particular area of the Southwest?
The Navajo are scattered around several states.
Okay.
They're part of a much larger group known as the Diné. So you can call them Diné, you can call them Navajo. They have a really great mythology, a very deep and rich mythology, which fortunately has been largely preserved. There's a lot of it that's been written down. They have an origin story about coming from one world to another. They traveled into different universes.
Who did the writing or recording?
The native people.
Okay.
So it's a very long, complicated backstory. At first I was going to tell that story.
Okay.
All the different universes. Each universe they come to is different. Each one they have to find a way to survive there. They move on to the next one afterwards. But I finally gave up on that because it was really complicated.
Sounds.
And I got into something that was a lot more like the kind of mythology that we're used to. Because they've always leaned into hero stories mostly. For good or ill, that's what I like telling the most. And fortunately, the Navajo have one of the best hero stories.
Ooh.
I still couldn't find a perfect version of it. Some versions are stronger in one section, some are stronger on another section. But it's the story of the hero twins. Now, when I told one person I was doing a story about twins, they said, well, is one good and one evil? And actually, no, they're not. They're both good. Because the dichotomy of the twins being separate, light versus dark and things like that, that's a very Western notion. In other cultures, because twins are so rare, they're always magical and almost always beneficial to society. And these are two of the best. So before they're born, though, their story starts with the Changing Woman. Changing Woman is the most important goddess in Navajo mythology. She is their Mother Earth. She's a cultural goddess who provides them with the ceremonies and things like that they live by. They're a matrilineal culture, so it's not surprising that they have a goddess who's their supreme deity. Changing Woman is also sometimes known as White Shell Woman.
Can't say that I'm familiar.
Yeah. She's famous in that part of the world. She's very beautiful, of course. Now, in some versions of the story, she's called Changing Woman because she changes all the time, and that she is an elderly woman in winter, but then becomes young again in spring. And so as the seasons pass, she gradually grows older.
It's a nice feature I'd like to have.
Yeah. So that way she literally represents the seasons. But there's several other different versions of her. In one version, she's born and grows up, and she's a goddess, and when she reaches her maturity, all the tribe comes and gives her white shells. And she finds it with a dress made of white shells. And after that, they always call her White Shell Woman. In some versions of the story, she's born as Changing Woman, and her name becomes White Shell Woman after she matures. There's actually a version in which they're two sisters, and they're two separate characters. But in most versions, Changing Woman and White Shell Woman are the same person. When she reaches her maturity and she gets the white dress that becomes her trademark, they also tie back her hair with buckskin. And the tying back of a woman's hair indicates gathering her thoughts, gathering her focus and determination. That's how women gather their power. They get the knot, they tie the buckskin into it. Kind of like Rambo going into battle with a headband, I imagine. She gives birth to magical children. Not surprising at this point in our study of world mythology. One day she was bathing in the water, and she was lying in the hot sun and really enjoying the caresses of the sun on her skin. And she started to feel kind of funny. So she got out of the water, and it wasn't too long after that she began to realize that she was with child. Now, being magical children, they spent 12 days in the womb. And then in 32 days, they had grown up completely. So basically in a month, they were fully grown.
Wow.
So yeah, a real time saver having magical children.
Absolutely.
It's not the first time we've encountered that.
Don't blink.
Yeah. So she decided to call the kids Naya Nizgani. I'll prefer to call him Monster Slayer, because I can pronounce that. And his twin brother, Tabashi Chini, or Child of Water.
Okay, is Monster Slayer an actual translation?
Yes, it means Monster Slayer.
Ooh.
Naya Nizagami means Monster Slayer.
Did these names speak to their actual purposes?
Well, yes, although Child of Water, not so much. A monster slayer, definitely. The problem with having names like that is word gets around. Now, in those days, the world was full of monsters, like really big, powerful, serious monsters. There's a phrase that's used to describe them, which translates into English as alien gods who take pleasure from killing, is what they call their monsters. So they're alien gods who take pleasure from killing. I think by alien they don't mean like another planet, they probably mean another dimension. But they weren't just like giants and cannibals. They were considered to be gods of another culture.
Could also just mean foreign too, right?
Or foreign, yeah. But they were all over the place. And so the biggest one, who is known simply as Big Giant, is what his name translates into. And Big Giant goes nosing around trying to find out what's going on. So White Shell Woman has to hide her children away. And she winds up digging a big like burrow and covering up with a rock and keeping them there so the giants wouldn't find them. But she knows it's really only a matter of time. So time passes and they grow up. To keep them busy when they're buried in the ground, she gives them bow and arrows to play with. And they both turn out to be fantastic archers, not surprisingly. But as they get older, they have a lot of questions. Like, who is our father? Now, she suspects their father is the sun. But the sun has a very bad reputation in this part of the world. They want to kill the giants who are menacing all the people. And they think their father's help would assist with that, because that's what the father's duty is to his warrior children. But they have to find their father first. And White Shell Woman thinks that's a bad idea. So they go through this whole ritual thing where they have to ask her 4 times, because 4 is a magic number. And after asking her 4 times, she admits that their father is the sun. But there's no guarantee he's going to help them.
As a parent, I can confirm that 4 times might in fact be the magic number.
Yep. So they take off on their adventure.
Okay.
And they have to travel to the sky where their father, the sun, lives. It is, of course, an epic journey. And there's a whole cycle of stories about everything they go through trying to get into the sky, which I won't go into here. They basically encounter various magical people, most of whom say, Earth people do not belong here. And then they explain, our father is the sun, and we must find him. So they reluctantly say, okay, all right, we'll let you go this time,
Who are these people again?
They're other gods, apparently, because they live in the sky. So they notice right away that the twins aren't where they're supposed to be.
So the idea of aliens in the planetary sense may not be all that far off.
Well, they have their own gods, but these are alien gods that they have to fight. In one version of the story, they encounter Spider-Woman, not the Marvel Comics character. And she's one of their goddesses, and she gives them each a magic feather that will help them along their journey. And at one point, they encounter various embodiments of different concepts. And at one point, they encounter a old guy, and they go through the whole ritual. Earth people do not belong up here. We're visiting our father. And he says, okay, but the path you're on is going to split. And do not take the path to the right. Go the path to the left. And so they're walking along, and the twins sit there. Well, half the time people have tried to stop us. They've actually killed several monsters on the way. So they decide, well, we're going to go to the right and trick this guy. So they go to the right. And so they're walking. And the older brother, Monster Slayer, turns over his shoulder and looks at Child of Water and sees his hair is starting to turn white.
Oh.
He thinks, well, that's kind of funny. So they keep on walking, and they're walking a little further, and he looks, and Child of Water's face now has lines on it. And so they keep going, and they're going. Then he looks over his shoulder, and Child of Water is half a mile behind him, walking with a cane. He goes running back and says, the guy we met must have been old age. And so he gave us really good advice after all. So they have to walk back on this path that they came, down to where it split, and then go back on the other way to retain their youth.
Oh.
But according to Navajo mythology, the younger born of the twins will go gray first. Ever since then. Yep.
Okay.
So it's an epic journey. They get many presents along the way they take with them. So they finally arrive up in the clouds where their father, the sun, lives. And they go in there, and they discover that he's actually married, and his wife is there. And they ask to see the sun, and she says, well, he's out now. He's down, shedding light all over the earth. But he'll be back soon at night. And so they decide to wait it out. And she does ask them, okay, who are you? And they explain. And she's like, oh. So she decides that her husband might be very angry if he finds them. So she rolls them up in a cloud to hide them. So they're inside this like gray storm cloud that you can't see through. And so sure enough, later on, after the sun sets, he comes back up to his house, and he says, I saw 2 specks in the sky heading towards this place. Where did they go? And instead, she just sits there, So you said when you traveled the earth, you were doing completely innocent things. And he's like, whoa, sure. Of course, now she's caught him. And so he can't really defend himself. So instead he says, I'm going to find those interlopers, and starts tearing the house apart, trying to locate them. He eventually finds a storm cloud, and he disintegrates it with his solar radiation, and they're there, and they say, we are your sons, and we've come to you, for training. So he says, well, how do I know you're really my son? I suspect you're just making this up. It is 2 ordinary guys who climbed into the heavens to come to my house. So he gives them a series of tests. And again, there's another cycle of stories about all the tests they have to go through. My favorite one was where he tricks them into going into a sweat lodge, and then he uses his solar radiance to heat it up till it's like an oven, basically. And he throws the door open, and they're both fine. And he goes, well, okay, there's a chance you're my kids. He also has 2 kids by his wife who are girls. And the girls tease the 2 boys mercilessly. And so ever since then, of course, your siblings have always made fun of you.
Of course.
That's been since this happened at the dawn of time. This is going on. So he has a series of gifts he offers them. He starts with magic horses that fly. And they're like, well, that's good, but that's not what we really came for. So then he goes to, look, a whole field of magic sheep. Look at all that wool and the mutton you can get off of it. And you're like, no. So they go through this ritual 2 more times, because it has to be 4 times, remember. So finally, he brings them to where he has his lightning stored, because he can, of course, send lightning to the earth, and he shoots it out of a bow, naturally. Mm-hmm. And so they happen to be the 2 greatest archers in the world, and they're like, lightning arrows. We want lightning arrows. And so the son has to give up his lightning to the hero twins. He does make a rainbow from them, go gliding back down to earth again.
Okay.
So they land back on the earth, and they decide to rid the world of monsters. It then starts the next set of stories in which they fight one monster after another. And every version I can find, they're really short. They don't really go on and on about it, even though they must be absolutely epic struggles. Huh. The first one they killed was the big god, the big giant. And she's drinking a hot springs dry. So they snuck up on him, and they killed him with their arrows. And then they're picked off the ground by a giant mother bird who came to feed them to her nest. Mm-hmm. They were able to escape and kill her children and kill her. And then they found a giant horned monster, like a giant, reptilian creature. And they're trying to figure a way that they could, get rid of him, because they have to hit the lightning in the heart to make sure of a quick kill. He's way too big to mess with. And so they're talking to Chipmunk, and Chipmunk says, well, I can help you. And so Chipmunk digs underground, and he goes back and forth 3 or 4 times, so his little chipmunk hole is tall enough for a person to go through. And he burrows underneath of the monster. And so they go down there, and they wriggle through the hole that he's made in the dirt, come underneath of him, and shoot their lightning arrow up right into his body.
Clever.
Very clever, yeah. That's as long as the stories get, though. I guarantee you there are longer versions out there. Huh. But they just, the storytellers who were doing them all just skipped over this part, like somehow killing monsters wasn't important. Even though the human race couldn't exist if they hadn't cleared monsters out of the earth.
Is there anything from their culture that would illuminate why it wouldn't be kind of a focal point?
I'm not sure. I was never able to find that out. Huh. There's Navajo storytellers who are perform on YouTube and things like that. There's 2 versions of this that are actually in Navajo, because they're worried about their language being lost. So Navajo storytellers are recording these in the original language. I found one with subtitles, fortunately.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And one of a grandmother telling it in Navajo exactly as she told it to her grandchildren.
Wow.
Which was wicked cool. They couldn't understand a word she said, but it was really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these stories are being deliberately recorded to keep them from being lost. They're aware that their culture could die out completely. Many native languages just aren't spoken anymore.
True.
So they're trying to keep Navajo alive. So the twins basically fought a bunch of monsters in a row. They have Rolling Stone. And Rolling Stone was a monster that, as you would guess by its name, rolled across the ground and crushed people in its wake. And so they tore them apart with lightning bolts. Now, several of the monsters they fought were made of stone. That was a big thing for monsters in those days. And supposedly, because they killed so many of them, they exploded them with their lightning arrows. That created all the weird, crazy rock formations in the American Southwest.
So I was going to say I've seen them. I didn't personally. I was going to, but Blaze, my younger son, was an infant at the time, and I had to stay back in the hotel room.
Oh.
But my husband and older son,
Yes.
they had to be a national park out there. So we were in New Mexico.
Yep.
And actually, Petroglyph National Park is probably what it was.
Yeah.
And so they got to see some really amazing, I want to say carvings into the rock.
Could be, yeah.
I think so. I don't think it was paint. I think it was carved. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, so that is their explanation for all the strange rock shapes out there.
Okay.
Is all the monsters they killed that were made of stone. My favorite enemy that they fought, enemy monster, was the one who translates into English as monster who kicks people off a cliff. And you would guess by that name that he kicks people off a cliff, and he does indeed.
I would hope so.
Yes, with a name like that. He lived up to his name, but fortunately, hero twins were able to outwit him. One of them lured him away from the edge of the cliff. The other guy hit him with his lightning arrows. They also fought man-eating bear. Again, he lived up to his name. And antelope. I don't consider antelopes personally dangerous, but they're really fast and strong. One of them wanted to trample you to death. You'd pretty much be in a lot of trouble.
You'd have to really make it angry.
You'd have to make it angry. Man-eating bear and antelope are often spoken of in the same sentence. Maybe they work together, you know? Antelope would lure people into a false sense of security, and then man-eating bear would come and go, "Rawr!"
Sounds like it's not out of the realm of possibility here.
Yeah. So these are awesome stories, and again, stuff like this is on the internet, a lot of it. I couldn't find a perfect version of this story. I wanted to make it a lot longer and go into a lot more detail, but I can't find any details about this. And I'm sure as soon as we stop filming, I'll go and I'll find the exact book that has everything I need in it.
Of course you will.
Yeah. Interestingly, the books that I have on Native American mythology gloss over the Navajo stuff quite a bit. Which is surprising because Navajo culture is actually very popular in our society. A guy named Tony Hillerman has written a series of mysteries set in Navajo reservation.
Oh.
And the Diné were upset at first that he was using their culture to tell these like murder mysteries, but he's actually extremely respectful of them. And he's made certain parts of the Southwest famous because he sets his stories there. And so they've accepted the fact that he actually is doing them a good turn by making some of them famous and bringing some of their legends out to light and things like that. I first encountered a lot of these stories in an old comic book called Scout by Timothy Truman, which was set in a post-apocalyptic world in which there was a hero who was a reincarnation of one of the hero twins, Monster Slayer. And after the apocalypse, of course, the world is filled with monsters again. There's also a native author named Rebecca Rowanhorse, who does modern stories and even post-apocalyptic stories involving the Diné people.
Okay.
So their culture is definitely very much alive. One thing I noticed, the storyteller that I finally found in English did something. I'm not sure whether it's something that all of the Navajo storytellers did or just him, but he would go through a whole big stanza, like, you know, and so they travel up the heavens, they travel up to the clouds, it is said. And he would finish each paragraph with, "it is said."
Okay.
It's a really cool storytelling technique. I like that.
Yeah. I'm sure I've heard that before.
Yeah.
If not from there, definitely rings a bell.
Yeah.
But I very much appreciate the part of the story where the twins go on this journey and there's, you know, the the fork and you go to the right
Yeah.
or left. Because while in New Mexico, I was confronted with that very circumstance.
Oh
and
dear.
I should not be followed. I chose the wrong path. The decrepit 30-year-old one that was in terrible disrepair. We survived it, but we're still talking about it these many years later.
Well, when they travel to see the sun, several people warn them away, and they say your father is merciless. Because as you probably know, having been there, the sun in that place can be brutal.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, the sun was considered to be somewhat evil. He turns out to be okay in the end, but it is not easy to deal with the sun. And I imagine if you live in that environment every day, the sun was not easy to deal with.
No.
But they managed to get on his good side. And so that is the story of the Navajo hero twins, Monster Slayer and Child of Water.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, it's a good story. Back next time, we will probably do Inuit mythology next time.
So, Alaska?
We're going north, yes.
Cool. Very cool.
All right. So I'll see you next time. Until then, I have been Ed.
Solitaire.
We'll see you again, and be safe.